I was a small-town kid who grew up with big dreams and even bigger doubts. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't exactly rolling in money either. My parents worked hard every day to make ends meet, and they raised me to understand the value of hard work. I always admired their grit and determination, but deep down, I knew I wanted more. I wanted to create something that wasn't just about making money, but about building something lasting, something meaningful. After high school, I went off to college. I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet, but I had this vague idea of going into business. My friends and family all expected me to become a lawyer or an accountant, jobs that were considered safe and respectable. But that wasn't for me. I had no interest in spending my life behind a desk, crunching numbers, or getting involved in legal battles. I wanted something different. The problem was, I didn't know exactly what that different was. In college, I spent most of my time experimenting. I tried different business ideas. Most of them were small, dumb things like selling custom t-shirts or offering tutoring services to younger students. None of them worked out, but they gave me the experience I needed to understand that entrepreneurship wasn't as glamorous as it looked on Instagram or in the movies. It was hard work. It was messy, and it often felt like one step forward, two steps back. One thing that stuck with me during college was my fascination with tech. The idea that software could solve complex problems and improve people's lives struck a chord with me. I wasn't a coder, but I became obsessed with learning about it. I spent countless nights reading articles, watching YouTube tutorials, and trying to understand the basics of software development. I knew that tech was where the future was headed, and if I wanted to create something meaningful, it had to be in this space. I graduated from college with a degree in business, but I felt completely unprepared for the real world. Everyone around me had more experience, more skills, and more connections. I was just another guy with a degree and a vague idea. It wasn't enough. I got a job at a tech startup to learn the ropes, and that's where things started to change for me. The startup was small, only about 10 people at the time, but it was fast-paced and full of energy. I learned a lot in the year I spent there, especially about the startup culture. People worked long hours, collaborated constantly, and were always looking for ways to improve and grow. But, like most startups, it had its issues. The founders didn't always agree on the direction of the company, and there were constant pivots. At the time, I was just a cog in the machine, but I started to see how the pieces came together and how fragile everything was. I realized that if I ever wanted to start my own company, I needed to understand how to build a business from the ground up, not just follow orders. After a year at the startup, I decided it was time to take the plunge. I had a vague idea for a product, an app that would help small businesses streamline their operations. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was something I felt passionate about. The problem was, I didn't know how to code. I could have hired a developer, but I was broke, and I didn't trust anyone else to bring my vision to life. So, I decided to teach myself to code. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I spent nights reading through documentation, watching tutorials, and trying to build something, anything, just to prove to myself I could do it. I remember one particular night where I spent 12 hours trying to fix a bug in my app. I was exhausted, frustrated, and ready to give up. But then, as if by magic, the code worked. The app finally ran without errors. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional. That was a turning point for me. I realized that if I could teach myself to code, I could teach myself to do anything. I wasn't just relying on my business degree anymore. I was becoming a creator. I started working on the app full-time, even though I had no money to support myself. I lived off savings, ate ramen every night, and worked out of my tiny apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was my dream. After months of hard work, I finally had a product ready to launch. I didn't have any money for marketing, so I reached out to local businesses and offered them free trials of my app in exchange for feedback. To my surprise, a few of them took me up on the offer, and they loved it. They were willing to pay for a subscription when I launched, and that's when I realized I might actually have something here. The first year of running my business was a blur. I worked long hours, learned everything I could about sales and marketing, and slowly started to build a customer base. My app wasn't perfect, but it solved a real problem for small business owners, and they appreciated the simplicity of it. I spent all my time improving the product, adding features, and fixing bugs. Slowly, word spread, and more businesses started signing up. By the end of the second year, I had enough customers to hire my first employee, a developer who helped me scale the product. That was a huge moment for me. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't alone in this journey. We worked together to build the product into something even better, and by the end of year 3, we were bringing in enough revenue to consider expanding further. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were plenty of times when I doubted myself, when I thought I was too small to compete with bigger companies, or when I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake quitting my job and going all in on this idea. There were times when I thought about giving up, but I didn't. I had come too far. The vision kept me going. By year 4, we had a team of 10, and the business was growing rapidly. We had clients across the country, and our product was being used by hundreds of small businesses to streamline their operations. I wasn't a tech expert, but I had built something that was solving a real problem, and that felt incredible. We were getting recognized by industry experts, and venture capitalists started reaching out to us. It was surreal. I'm now 5 years into running this business, and looking back, I still can't believe how far we've come. We've raised some venture capital and have a solid team working on building the company. The journey hasn't been easy, but every challenge has taught me something valuable. I've learned that being an entrepreneur isn't just about having a great idea. It's about resilience, adaptability, and relentless persistence. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this. The road to entrepreneurship is long and tough, but if you have the passion and the drive to keep going, anything is possible. I didn't start with connections, money, or even a clear vision. I started with a desire to create something meaningful, and along the way, I learned what it took to turn that desire into reality. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. It all started in a tiny coffee shop in the middle of a bustling city, the kind of place where people huddled in front of their laptops, nursing overpriced lattes while trying to escape the chaos of the world around them. I was no different from the dozens of other people in that shop, sipping my cappuccino and pretending to look busy. At 28, I had found myself in a bit of a rut. I had just left my corporate job at a marketing firm, the kind of job that paid well but drained the life out of me. I wanted more. I needed more. The idea came to me one day, almost by accident. I was sitting there, scrolling through social media, when I stumbled upon an ad for a new startup. They were selling eco-friendly products, reusable straws, water bottles, organic cotton bags, and the like. At first, I thought it was just another trend that would fade away in a few months. But then I started doing some research. What I found blew my mind. The market for sustainable products was growing rapidly. Consumers were becoming more conscious of their environmental footprint, and they were willing to pay a premium for products that aligned with their values. I saw an opportunity. I spent the next few weeks obsessively researching sustainable products, suppliers, and the logistics of running an online business. I had no formal background in e-commerce, no real experience in entrepreneurship, but I had something that was perhaps more important: the drive. I began to outline a plan. My goal was to create a brand that not only sold eco-friendly products, but also educated consumers about the importance of sustainability. I wanted to build a community, not just a customer base. I figured if I could combine quality products with a strong message, I could differentiate myself from the countless other businesses in the same space. The first few months were rough. I didn't have a ton of money to invest, so I bootstrapped everything. I learned how to build a website, manage inventory, and handle customer service, all while still working part-time at a local coffee shop to pay the bills. I remember the first time I made a sale. It wasn't much, just a single reusable water bottle, but it felt like a huge victory. My heart raced as I packed the order and shipped it out, feeling a sense of accomplishment that I hadn't felt in years. Slowly but surely, I began to build a small but loyal following. But I wasn't content with just a few orders trickling in. I wanted to scale. I started reaching out to influencers who were passionate about sustainability, offering them free products in exchange for shout-outs on social media. I ran Facebook and Instagram ads, targeting people who had shown an interest in eco-friendly products. And slowly, the orders started to pick up. In the first year, I was able to gross around $50,000 in revenue. It wasn't a huge sum by startup standards, but it was enough to prove that the idea had legs. By the time the second year rolled around, things started to really take off. My website traffic exploded, my social media following grew exponentially, and my products began to appear in online marketplaces like Amazon and Etsy. But with success came new challenges. As the business grew, so did the demands. I had to hire my first employee, a fulfillment manager who would handle packaging and shipping. I also outsourced customer service, which freed up my time to focus on growing the brand. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. One of the biggest was underestimating the complexity of inventory management. There were several times when I ran out of stock on popular items, which led to frustrated customers and a temporary dip in sales. I quickly learned that having a solid inventory system was crucial to maintaining a smooth operation. Another mistake I made was trying to do everything myself. As a solo entrepreneur, I had a tendency to micromanage every aspect of the business. I wasn't willing to delegate tasks, thinking I could handle it all. But as the business expanded, I realized I had to trust others to take on responsibilities. Once I started letting go of some of the control, things became much easier. By the end of the second year, the business was making over $200,000 in revenue. I couldn't believe how far I had come. What started as a side hustle had grown into a full-fledged business, and I was finally able to quit my part-time job at the coffee shop. The third year was when things really hit their stride. I had built a solid team, expanded my product line, and even launched a blog to share sustainability tips and news. The brand's message resonated with a growing community of environmentally conscious consumers, and I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. But success didn't come without its setbacks. In the fourth year, I faced one of the most challenging periods of my career. A competitor, much larger and better funded, entered the market with a similar product line. They were able to undercut my prices and run massive ad campaigns. For a brief moment, I was scared. I thought I might lose everything I had worked for. But I didn't give up. Instead, I doubled down on what made my brand unique: quality, sustainability, and community. I invested in better customer service, offering personalized support and going above and beyond to make sure my customers were happy. I also worked on creating partnerships with environmental organizations and nonprofits, which allowed me to donate a portion of profits to causes I cared about. It wasn't easy, but by the end of the year, I had not only survived the competition, but I had thrived. My customer base had grown even stronger, and my brand had gained a reputation for authenticity. I learned that price wasn't always the most important factor for consumers. Values were. Today, my business generates over $1 million in revenue annually. I've expanded into new markets, launched new products, and built a team of 15 employees. We still focus on sustainability, but we've also diversified, offering eco-friendly home goods, skincare, and even clothing. Looking back, I realized that the hardest part wasn't the early days when I was working 18-hour shifts and barely scraping by. The hardest part was believing in myself when things didn't seem to be working. There were so many times when I wanted to give up, when I thought it would be easier to just go back to a regular job. But every time I felt like quitting, I remembered why I started. Being an entrepreneur is never easy. There are moments of doubt, moments of failure, and moments of success that feel like they might slip away at any moment. But if you're willing to keep going, if you're willing to learn from your mistakes and adapt, the rewards can be more than worth it. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm on the right path. And that's something I'll never take for granted. I was 23 when I first got the idea for my business. I had just graduated from college, unsure of what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to work for someone else. I wasn't lazy, I was ambitious. I just felt like there had to be more to life than clocking in and out, working to build someone else's dream. It all started with a problem I had faced during my college years. I was living on a tight budget, eating ramen and cheap takeout. Like most college students, I didn't have a lot of money, but I also wanted to eat healthy. There was this constant struggle between eating well and not breaking the bank. I realized that I wasn't alone in this struggle. Most of my friends had the same complaints. One evening, I was talking to my best friend, Steve, about how expensive it was to eat healthy. I told him, "Man, there's got to be a way to make healthy food more affordable for people like us." Steve was the type of guy who always had creative ideas, but he wasn't particularly passionate about business. He was more of a let's have fun and see where life takes us kind of guy. But when I pitched the idea to him, he was intrigued. Why don't you start something? You could make a business out of it, he said. I laughed it off at first. I have no clue how to start a business. I have no money, no connections, nothing. But Steve insisted, and after some back and forth, I decided to do some research. I started reading everything I could about starting a business. I researched everything from how to write a business plan to how to handle taxes. The more I learned, the more I realized this was something I could do. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I came up with the idea for a meal prep service that would cater to college students and young professionals. The premise was simple, affordable, healthy meals delivered to your door every week. I had the idea, but now I had to figure out how to make it happen. I had no experience in the food industry, but I did have a strong background in cooking. I spent hours perfecting recipes that were both nutritious and budget-friendly. The goal was to create meals that didn't taste like cardboard, which I knew would be a common complaint about health food. I wanted something that people would enjoy eating, even if they weren't necessarily health-conscious. The next challenge was the logistics. How would I get the meals to people? How would I keep them fresh? I didn't have the money to invest in a fancy kitchen or delivery service. So, I started small. I rented a commercial kitchen space a couple of days a week to prepare the meals and hired a few friends to help with the delivery. I would cook the meals, portion them out, and deliver them by bike, because I didn't own a car. It was exhausting. I was doing everything myself, from cooking to marketing to customer service, but it was working. Slowly but surely, people started to take notice. The first few weeks were rough. I didn't have a big customer base, and I was still figuring out how to make everything work smoothly. But I kept pushing forward, tweaking my recipes and delivery system as I went. I created a website and started using social media to promote my service. The feedback I got was overwhelmingly positive. People loved the idea of having healthy meals delivered to their door, especially when they didn't have to spend a ton of money to get them. I remember the day I got my first real customer. It wasn't just a friend or family member. It was a complete stranger who found my service through Instagram. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a huge win. From there, the momentum started to build. More people were signing up, and I was able to make enough money to hire a couple more people to help with cooking and deliveries. But things weren't all smooth sailing. The food industry is cutthroat, and there were many hurdles along the way. One of the biggest issues I faced was scalability. As the business grew, I found it harder to manage everything on my own. I couldn't continue delivering meals on my bike, and I needed to expand my kitchen space to meet demand. But renting a larger space and hiring more employees meant taking on more expenses. I was terrified. I was running on a shoestring budget, and every decision I made felt like it could either propel the business forward or cause it to collapse. I also faced fierce competition from bigger companies. Some of them had massive marketing budgets and teams of people to handle logistics, whereas I was still a small startup, trying to juggle everything myself. But I wasn't about to give up. I knew I had something special, and I was determined to make it work. The turning point came when I decided to invest in technology. I built an app that allowed customers to customize their meal plans and set delivery schedules. The app streamlined the ordering process and made it easier for customers to interact with the business. It was a huge gamble, but it paid off. The app brought in new customers, and the convenience factor made it easier for existing customers to stick around. With the app, I was able to automate a lot of the processes that had been taking up my time. This allowed me to focus on the bigger picture, scaling the business, finding new suppliers, and creating new meal options. I also invested in a better delivery system, which helped improve the customer experience. But even as the business grew, I never lost sight of the original mission, making healthy, affordable food accessible to everyone. I knew that if I stayed true to that mission, the business would continue to thrive. It wasn't about becoming a millionaire or making a huge profit. It was about providing value to people's lives and solving a problem that I knew many people, especially students and young professionals, were facing. Today, my company is still growing. We've expanded into new cities, and our meal options have expanded to cater to different dietary needs. I've built a team of amazing people who are just as passionate about the mission as I am. But the road to success was anything but easy. There were moments when I felt like giving up. There were moments when I doubted myself and my ability to succeed. But looking back, I realized that every obstacle I faced taught me something valuable. It wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about learning how to overcome it, how to adapt, and how to keep moving forward, even when things seemed impossible. Starting this business has been the hardest thing I've ever done, but it has also been the most rewarding. I've learned more about myself in the past few years than I ever thought possible. And while I'm proud of what I've built, I know the journey is far from over. There are always new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to grow. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that if you have a dream and are willing to put in the work, you can make it happen. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But if you stay focused, stay persistent, and keep learning from your mistakes, you can turn your idea into something real. I'm proof of that. I never thought I'd be telling this story. In fact, there was a time when I didn't think I'd ever make it this far. It's been a crazy ride, and now that I've come out the other side, I'm trying to capture how it all unfolded. It's a story of failure, hustle, a bit of luck, and a lot of mistakes that eventually led to something that's now worth millions. Let me start from the beginning. I was born and raised in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and ambition is mostly limited to either running a family business or becoming a high school football star. I didn't come from money, and honestly, I don't even think I had a clear vision of what success looked like back then. But one thing was clear: I always wanted more. I didn't want the 9 to 5, the same routine, the same faces day in and day out. I wanted to build something. I wanted to create. So, I went to college, not because I was dying to get a degree, but because I thought it was the only way to get out of my hometown. I wasn't the best student. In fact, I struggled with grades. I was always more interested in side projects. I started a small online store during my sophomore year. It was a drop-shipping business, and it made absolutely no money, but I learned a lot about the fundamentals of online marketing, how to set up websites, and how to deal with suppliers. At the time, I was making about $50 a month, and my friends would laugh at me, saying things like, "That's cute, but you should focus on passing your classes first." Still, I kept at it. After college, I took a traditional route and ended up working a corporate job. I was miserable. I sat in a cubicle every day, typing out reports that no one cared about, wondering if this was it. Was this what I had worked so hard for? I had an aha moment one day when my boss took credit for a project that I had done most of the work on. It made me realize that I was just another cog in the machine, and that was when I decided to quit. No safety net, no savings, just a dream and a ton of debt. I spent the next few months brainstorming what I could do. At the time, the idea of starting an online business was still fresh in my mind. I thought about what I had learned during my failed drop-shipping venture, and I decided to take it a step further. Instead of selling random products, I would focus on a niche that I was passionate about: fitness. Specifically, home workout equipment. I knew there was a growing demand for it, especially with the pandemic making gym visits a luxury for many people. I thought, if I can just get the right product and market it correctly, I can make this work. I started my second venture from scratch. I found a manufacturer overseas who could make affordable, high-quality dumbbells, yoga mats, resistance bands, and kettlebells. It was slow at first. I spent hours each day setting up a website, creating ads, and trying to get traction. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was relentless. I spent nights researching SEO, learning about Facebook ads, and figuring out how to optimize my website. There were times I thought about giving up. In fact, there were a few weeks where I thought I had wasted my time and money. But then, one day, it clicked. I remember the first sale I made. It was a dumbbell set. I woke up to the notification, and for a moment, I couldn't believe it. Someone had actually paid me money for something I created. That feeling was incredible. It wasn't much, just a small order, but it gave me hope that this could actually work. I kept going. I scaled up slowly, reinvesting every penny I made back into the business. I hired a few contractors to help with customer service, social media, and even photography. The first few months were chaotic, trying to juggle it all, but the sales were picking up. I was getting customer feedback, improving the product listings, and optimizing the ads. I had a vision now, a goal. And that goal was to build a brand, not just a store. Eventually, I managed to land a partnership with a fitness influencer. She had a large following and was very active on social media, so when she shared my product, the orders flooded in. It was like a switch flipped. Sales exploded, and I found myself trying to keep up with the demand. It was a good problem to have, but it also meant late nights, sleepless weekends, and a lot of stress. There were bumps along the way, though. I had issues with shipping delays, inventory shortages, and customer complaints that felt like they would drown me. I had days when I wondered if it was all worth it, but every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself of why I started in the first place. I wasn't going back to a desk job. I wasn't going to let this dream slip away. Fast forward a couple of years, and my company had grown exponentially. We had a full team of 20 employees, a warehouse, and a logistics system that could handle thousands of orders a day. What once started as a simple side hustle was now a legitimate business that was making millions in revenue. We had a loyal customer base, and the brand was recognized in the fitness community. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The biggest challenge I faced wasn't the competition or the market, it was my own mindset. As the company grew, I found it harder to keep up with the day-to-day operations. I had to learn how to delegate, how to trust my team, and how to let go of control. I also had to deal with burnout and exhaustion. I thought I could do it all, but I had to come to terms with the fact that I couldn't. That realization was the turning point for me. I hired a CEO to handle the operations, and I shifted my role to focus on the vision and growth strategy. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. The business took off even more when I wasn't bogged down in the details. I could focus on partnerships, marketing, and new product development, things that truly move the needle. Now, I look back and can't believe how far we've come. From a tiny, failing online store to a multi-million-dollar fitness brand. I still have moments where it doesn't feel real. I've learned more in these past few years than I ever could have in a traditional job. And it's not just about the money. It's about the freedom, the impact, and the people I've met along the way. The journey wasn't easy. It was full of setbacks, failures, and sleepless nights. But it taught me one thing: persistence pays off. The hustle is real, and if you're willing to put in the work, stay flexible, and keep learning, anything is possible. If you're starting a business or thinking about it, don't let anyone tell you it's too risky or that you need a perfect plan. There's no perfect plan. You make it perfect by doing, failing, and trying again. So, to anyone out there thinking of quitting their job to chase a dream or feeling stuck in a project, just keep pushing. Don't listen to the doubters. They're not in your shoes. You're building something, and even though it feels like you're moving at a snail's pace, you're closer to success than you think. And when that moment finally comes, it's all worth it. This is a story of how I built my small startup from scratch in the most unexpected way. I never set out to be an entrepreneur, nor did I ever dream of running my own business. But here I am, 5 years later, with a team of 15 people, a product used by thousands, and a passion for what I do. It all started when I was working as a software engineer at a big tech company in Silicon Valley. My job was great, the pay was decent, the benefits were excellent, and I had a comfortable life. But there was a problem. I wasn't happy. I felt like I was just another cog in the machine, spending my days fixing bugs and writing code for products I didn't really care about. I wasn't growing. I wasn't challenged. And most of all, I wasn't doing anything that truly made me feel alive. I had always been the type of person to seek out new challenges. I liked solving problems, thinking outside the box, and building things. In my free time, I would work on side projects, building apps, tinkering with new technologies, and trying out new business ideas. But every time I got excited about something, I would push it aside, thinking, this is just a hobby. I've got a stable job, a good salary. Why risk it all? But one day, something changed. It was 2018, and I was working on a particularly tedious project at work. I had been staring at the same lines of code for hours, trying to fix a bug that didn't seem to want to go away. I was frustrated, exhausted, and feeling more and more like I was wasting my potential. That's when I had an idea. What if I could build a tool that helped developers like me work more efficiently? Something that would automate certain repetitive tasks, speed up the coding process, and make the whole experience less frustrating? At first, I brushed it off as just another half-baked idea. But as the days went by, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I realized that this idea was different. It wasn't just a hobby project. It was something that could actually make a real difference in people's lives, something that could solve a real problem. So, I decided to take the plunge. I quit my job and began working on my startup full-time. I had no real business experience, no savings to fall back on, and no clear path to success. But I had a vision and a belief that if I worked hard enough, I could make it happen. I started small. I built the first version of my tool in my spare time, working nights and weekends. I reached out to a few fellow developers for feedback, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People told me that they had been struggling with the same issues I had faced, and they were excited to see a solution. That was when I realized I had something worth pursuing. I knew I couldn't do it alone, though. I needed a team. So, I started looking for co-founders who shared my vision and had the skills I didn't possess. After a few months of networking and interviews, I found two incredible people who were just as passionate about the idea as I was. One was a designer, and the other was a marketer. We hit it off instantly. With my new team in place, we began working full-time on the product. We didn't have much money, so we worked out of a tiny co-working space, living on ramen noodles and the occasional cup of coffee. The early days were tough. We faced countless challenges, from technical issues to funding problems to finding customers. There were moments when we all doubted whether we could pull it off, but we kept going. We started by releasing a beta version of the product and offering it for free to a select group of users. The feedback we received was invaluable, and we made rapid improvements to the product. Soon, word began to spread, and we started gaining a small but loyal following. Then came the breakthrough. We got our first paying customer. It wasn't much, just a small contract with a local tech startup, but it was a huge milestone for us. It validated the idea, proving that people were willing to pay for our product. We used that money to improve the tool further, hire more people, and scale up our operations. As the business grew, we faced new challenges. Competition was fierce, and we had to constantly innovate to stay ahead. We had to figure out how to market the product effectively, how to handle customer support, and how to keep up with the demand. But through it all, we stayed focused on our mission, to help developers work smarter, not harder. Over the next couple of years, we grew steadily. We raised a small round of funding from angel investors, which allowed us to hire more developers and expand our marketing efforts. We also started partnering with larger companies, which helped us reach a broader audience. But despite the growth, there were still moments when it felt like everything might fall apart. We had several close calls with cash flow problems, and there were times when I questioned whether we were on the right path. But every time we hit a roadblock, we found a way to push through. We learned from our mistakes, adapted to the market, and kept improving the product. By 2023, we had a fully functioning business with a solid customer base. We had grown our team to 15 people, and we were generating enough revenue to pay ourselves decent salaries and reinvest in the company. The product was no longer just a tool for developers. It had evolved into a comprehensive platform that helped teams manage their entire development process more efficiently. But despite all the progress, I still found myself wondering, was it all worth it? The late nights, the stress, the uncertainty, the constant pressure to innovate and grow? The answer is yes. It was all worth it. Being an entrepreneur isn't easy. It's not glamorous. There are no shortcuts, and there's no guarantee of success. But if you're willing to put in the work, take risks, and stay true to your vision, it can be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life. Today, we're a small but thriving company, and I couldn't be prouder of what we've built. We've helped thousands of developers and teams, and we continue to grow. But more importantly, I've learned something about myself, that I'm capable of far more than I ever imagined. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. So, if you're out there, wondering whether you should take that leap and start your own business, my advice is simple: do it. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. You'll learn more about yourself than you ever thought possible, and even if you fail, you'll come out of it stronger than before. You just have to take that first step. I've always been a fan of rags to riches stories. You know, the ones where someone with nothing builds an empire from sheer grit and determination. It's the stuff dreams are made of. But little did I know, I was about to embark on my own version of that story, albeit one that was messier, more unpredictable, and filled with moments of doubt. My journey began in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Growing up, we didn't have much. My family lived paycheck to paycheck, and the idea of starting a business seemed as far-fetched as being a rocket scientist. But I always had a deep curiosity about how things worked, how people made money, and why some seemed to thrive while others struggled. It wasn't long before I became obsessed with entrepreneurship. I was 18 when I started working at a local coffee shop. The job was nothing glamorous, but it was a way to make ends meet. Every day, I served coffee, greeted customers, and made small talk with regulars. But in the back of my mind, I was constantly thinking about how I could do more, how I could build something for myself. I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. One day, while I was taking a break in the staff room, I had a conversation with an older coworker. He had been working in various businesses his whole life and had recently started his own small online store selling handcrafted leather goods. He told me he had been doing it part-time for a few years and was making a decent side income. That conversation changed everything. I was intrigued. It sounded so simple. Start small, work hard, and build from there. But there was one catch. I didn't have any money to invest. I barely had enough to pay my rent, let alone start a business. However, that didn't stop me. I started researching everything I could about online businesses. I spent hours reading articles, watching videos, and learning about the process. I came across the idea of dropshipping, a business model where you don't keep inventory and instead, a third-party supplier ships the product directly to the customer. It seemed perfect, low risk, low investment, and scalable. I decided to dive in. I saved up a few $100 over the next couple of months by cutting back on spending. I didn't go out with friends, stopped buying snacks, and did everything I could to set aside enough for my first investment. With my savings, I bought a website domain, a cheap Shopify plan, and a few samples of products I thought would sell well. I started with a niche I was passionate about: custom phone accessories. The market was flooded, but I thought I could carve out a small piece if I focused on quality and a unique angle. The first few weeks were rough. I had no idea what I was doing, and my website looked like it had been designed by a child with a crayon. But I didn't care. I had a product, a website, and most importantly, hope. Slowly, I began to figure out the mechanics of digital marketing, setting up social media ads, and trying to drive traffic to my site. I spent hours tweaking my ads, experimenting with different copy, and learning the best practices for conversion rates. Every dollar I made went straight back into the business to fund more advertising and improve the website. Despite all my effort, sales were slow. I wasn't giving up, though. It was the only thing that kept me going, the idea that if I just kept pushing, it would eventually click. One day, about 2 months in, it finally happened. I woke up to an email notification telling me I had made my first sale. It wasn't much, just a $25 order, but that single sale felt like I had just won the lottery. Someone had bought something I'd made, and they were happy with it. The validation was priceless. After that first sale, things started to pick up slowly. More orders came in, and I started refining my product offerings. But there was still one huge obstacle: time. I was working full-time at the coffee shop, running my business in the evenings, and trying to stay sane through it all. My social life took a hit. I barely saw my friends, and when I did, they didn't understand why I was always on my laptop, staring at screens for hours. The sacrifices were starting to feel real. I remember one particularly rough night. It was close to 2 a.m., and I was sitting at my kitchen table, sorting through customer complaints and trying to figure out why my website wasn't converting like I thought it should. I was exhausted, frustrated, and questioning whether this whole entrepreneurial dream was worth it. But just as I was about to give up, I got a text from a friend who was following my journey. He told me, "I see what you're doing, and I believe in you." That simple message reignited a spark in me. It reminded me that people were watching, even if I didn't realize it, and that kept me going. I kept pushing. The late nights continued, but they became less about survival and more about building something I could be proud of. I expanded my product line, learned more about SEO, and started improving the user experience on my site. I also outsourced some tasks, like customer service, so I could focus more on scaling the business. Fast forward a year, and my business was doing well enough that I was able to quit my job at the coffee shop and work on it full-time. The freedom was incredible. No more early mornings or dealing with difficult customers. But with that freedom came new challenges. I was now fully responsible for every aspect of the business: marketing, product sourcing, fulfillment, finances, and everything in between. The stress was at an all-time high, but I thrived on it. I loved the grind, the constant problem-solving, and the sense of accomplishment that came with seeing the business grow. As time went on, I found more ways to optimize my business, and revenue kept increasing. I expanded into new niches, added new products, and even started creating my own custom designs. I hired a small team to help with logistics, and soon enough, I was working with suppliers directly overseas, cutting out middlemen and increasing my margins. I had finally turned this side hustle into a full-fledged business. But here's the kicker. After reaching a point where the business was profitable, I realized that it wasn't the money that kept me going anymore. Sure, financial freedom was a huge benefit, but the real joy came from building something that was entirely mine. The risk, the uncertainty, the long nights, they had all paid off in ways I couldn't have imagined back when I was just trying to make a few extra bucks. Now, when people ask me how I built my business, I don't sugarcoat it. I tell them the truth. It was tough, and there were countless moments when I felt like quitting. But it was also incredibly rewarding. There is no shortcut to success, But if you have the drive and the willingness to learn from every failure, the rewards are worth it. I'm still running the business today, and though I've had some bumps along the way, it's been an incredible ride. The next goal? Expanding even further, maybe even creating my own line of products. It's a constant journey, but I wouldn't have it any other way. If there's one lesson I've learned, it's this. You don't need a huge amount of money to start. You just need the will to keep going when everything seems like it's falling apart. That's when the magic happens. This is the story of how I turned a $500 investment into a successful business after losing my job and feeling like my life was crumbling around me. It all started back in 2018. I was working as a marketing manager for a small but rapidly growing company. Things were going well at first. I was making a decent salary, had a good relationship with my coworkers, and was generally content with my life. But the first sign of trouble came when the company went through a round of layoffs. One by one, my coworkers started disappearing, and before I knew it, I was let go too. At first, I was devastated. I had been working in that industry for over 10 years, and I thought I had finally found a stable job. But that illusion was shattered in an instant. With no job prospects in sight, I spent the next few months bouncing from interview to interview, but nothing stuck. It was a brutal time. I had savings, but they were running out quickly, and the pressure was mounting. I felt like my life was spiraling out of control. One night, I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my dwindling bank account, when I realized that something needed to change. I couldn't just keep hoping for a job to fall into my lap. I had to take control of my situation. But the question was, how? That's when I stumbled across a thread on Reddit. It was one of those side hustle threads where people talk about how they made money outside of their 9-to-5 jobs. Most of the suggestions were typical: freelance writing, driving for Uber, selling stuff on eBay. But one comment caught my eye. A guy mentioned that he had started a small e-commerce business selling custom t-shirts online, and it had completely changed his life. I don't know why, but that comment hit me hard. It wasn't just the idea of selling t-shirts. It was the idea of starting something from scratch, building it up, and being my own boss. The concept of e-commerce, running a business without the constraints of a traditional office job, resonated with me. I decided I would give it a shot. At that point, I had $500 left in my savings account, and I had to make it count. I did some research and found out that starting an online t-shirt business wasn't as complicated as I thought. There were platforms like Printful and Teespring that allowed you to create custom designs, list them for sale, and print them on demand without needing to buy inventory up front. Essentially, you could start a business with zero investment in stock. I spent the next few days brainstorming designs. I knew I didn't want to just create another generic t-shirt brand. There were already thousands of those. I wanted something with a personal touch, something that would resonate with people on an emotional level. After a lot of thought, I came up with a theme around positive affirmations. T-shirts with simple, empowering messages like "You got this" and "Stay strong" that would inspire people to believe in themselves. I figured there was a market for motivational clothing, especially with the rise of wellness and self-care trends. I got to work designing my shirts. I wasn't a designer by any means, but I used Canva and some free design tools to create simple yet eye-catching graphics. I uploaded them to Printful and connected my store to Shopify, which was another cost-effective platform to get started. I set up my website, wrote a few product descriptions, and launched my first collection. I was terrified. What if no one bought anything? What if I wasted my last $500? But then something amazing happened. Within a week, I made my first sale. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. I realized that I had just created something out of nothing, and it was out there in the world. Over the next few months, sales started to trickle in, and my confidence grew. I wasn't getting rich, but I was making progress. As I continued to refine my designs and market my brand on social media, something clicked. I realized that the key to success in e-commerce wasn't just about selling a product, it was about building a community. I started engaging with my customers more, responding to their comments and messages, and sharing their photos wearing my shirts. I also created a Facebook group where people could share their own positive affirmations and stories of personal growth. It became more than just a clothing brand. It became a movement. By 2019, my business was generating enough income for me to quit my day job. I had reached the point where I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. I was making more money than I had ever made in my corporate job, and I had the freedom to work on my terms. The stress that had once weighed me down was replaced with excitement and motivation. But as with any entrepreneurial journey, it wasn't all smooth sailing. As the business grew, so did the challenges. I had to learn how to manage my time effectively, handle customer service, and deal with the technical aspects of running an online store. The learning curve was steep, and there were plenty of sleepless nights. But the sense of fulfillment I got from seeing my hard work pay off kept me going. By 2020, I had expanded my product line beyond t-shirts. I added hoodies, mugs, posters, and even journals with motivational messages. My brand had gained a loyal following, and I was finally in a position where I could hire help. I brought on a part-time assistant to help with customer service, and I outsourced some of the marketing tasks to a freelancer. This allowed me to focus more on growing the business and developing new product ideas. Fast forward to 2023, and my business is now a six-figure operation. I've been able to reinvest in the company, expanding to multiple sales channels, including Amazon and Etsy, and launching a subscription box service for people who want monthly motivational gear. My story has been featured in several business blogs, and I've even had the opportunity to speak at a few entrepreneurial events. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. If someone had told me in 2018 that I would be running my own successful business, I wouldn't have believed them. But that $500 investment was the best decision I ever made. It taught me that even in the darkest moments, there's always an opportunity to turn things around. Sometimes, all it takes is the courage to take that first step. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, feeling stuck, uncertain, and unsure of your next move, take it from me. You have the power to change your life. It might not happen overnight, but if you're willing to put in the work, stay consistent, and learn from your mistakes, anything is possible. That $500 investment, it wasn't just the money that changed my life. It was the belief that I could create something for myself. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. I grew up in a small town in the middle of nowhere. My parents owned a local convenience store that had been in the family for generations. It wasn't much, but it was steady, and I always knew I'd end up working there someday. The store was a community staple, and everyone knew my parents by name. As a kid, I'd sit behind the counter and watch the same customers come in every day, buying their newspapers, snacks, and milk. I was surrounded by a sense of routine, and honestly, I didn't think much about life beyond the walls of that store. Fast forward to when I was 18. I had no idea what I wanted to do after high school, so I took a gap year and worked full-time at the store. That year, I learned the ins and outs of running a business, how to handle inventory, deal with suppliers, and manage customer service. But even though I had all this experience, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger out there for me. My parents were content with their store, and I respected that. But I didn't want to spend the rest of my life running a small-town business. One night, I was sitting on the front porch of our house, scrolling through Instagram when I stumbled upon a post about dropshipping. I had heard of it before, but I didn't know much about it. The more I read, the more intrigued I became. The idea of selling products online without ever having to deal with inventory or shipping seemed like the perfect way to start a business with minimal risk. I did what any 18-year-old would do in that situation. I dove deep into YouTube videos and read as many blogs as I could find. I spent the next few months learning everything I could about dropshipping. I remember the first product I decided to sell, some weird LED light strips that were trending. I spent hours building my first Shopify store, writing product descriptions, and creating a simple Facebook ad campaign. I was terrified. I was just a kid with no real business experience beyond my time at the convenience store, and I wasn't even sure if I'd make a sale. The first week was a disaster. I spent $50 on ads and didn't make a single sale. I started to doubt myself, but then I remembered the persistence my parents had shown over the years with their store. They didn't give up when things were tough. They kept going because they believed in what they were doing. So I kept pushing. I made changes to my website, tweaked my ads, and started researching more about my audience. A month later, I made my first sale. It was a small order, but it felt like a huge victory. I couldn't believe that someone, somewhere, actually bought something from my online store. That moment lit a fire in me. From that point forward, I was obsessed. I spent every spare minute working on my dropshipping business, learning about SEO, Facebook ads, and customer service. I tried different products and learned what worked and what didn't. By the time I was 19, I had managed to scale my store to a point where I was making enough money to support myself. But even though I was making money, I still didn't feel secure. Dropshipping, I learned the hard way, wasn't as easy as it seemed. The competition was fierce, and the market was flooded with people selling similar products. Profit margins were slim, and shipping times from China were often a problem. Sometimes, customers would get frustrated and demand refunds, which was a huge hit to my bottom line. One day, after dealing with a particularly nasty customer complaint, I hit a breaking point. I realized that the way I was running my business wasn't sustainable in the long run. I couldn't keep relying on suppliers halfway around the world, and I couldn't continue dealing with endless customer service issues. I needed to make a change. That's when I decided to pivot. I knew I didn't want to give up on e-commerce entirely, but I wanted something more stable and scalable. I had a conversation with my parents about possibly transitioning the convenience store into an online business. They were skeptical at first. After all, they had built their entire lives around that brick-and-mortar store, and it was hard for them to imagine changing things up. But after several weeks of discussions, I convinced them to let me give it a shot. I spent the next few months revamping the store's website and setting up an e-commerce platform. I didn't want to just sell the same old products my parents had been selling for years. I wanted to expand the inventory and offer unique items that could attract a wider audience. I also focused on marketing, something my parents had never really done. I created social media pages for the store, ran ads, and started engaging with customers online. It wasn't easy at first, but slowly, we started to see some traction. The real breakthrough came when I realized that I could use the same techniques I had learned from dropshipping, like Facebook ads, influencer partnerships, and email marketing, to bring more traffic to the online store. We started seeing a steady increase in sales, and for the first time, I felt like we were running a modern business. I learned to leverage SEO to drive organic traffic and use content marketing to build a brand identity. It was the exact type of business I had always wanted to create. The growth was slow at first, but over time, the online store became more and more profitable. I expanded the product offerings to include niche items that resonated with our target audience, and our customer service improved dramatically. I even introduced a subscription box service, which became a hit. The business went from barely breaking even to making a consistent profit every month. By the time I was 22, I had turned the family convenience store into a thriving online brand. My parents, who had initially been hesitant, were proud of what we had accomplished. They saw how far the business had come and how it had adapted to the times. But more importantly, they saw that I had built something sustainable that could last long after they retired. Looking back, I realized that the journey wasn't easy. There were countless sleepless nights, setbacks, and moments of doubt. There were times when I wanted to give up, but I kept pushing forward. I now understand that entrepreneurship isn't just about making money. It's about solving problems and being willing to learn and adapt. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I know the journey is far from over. And now, as I sit back and look at the business I've built, I can't help but smile. From a small convenience store in the middle of nowhere to a successful e-commerce business, it's been one hell of a ride. And I wouldn't change a thing. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I remember when I first started my business. It was the summer of 2017, and I was fresh out of college. I had no savings, no experience, and no idea what I was doing. All I had was a drive to succeed, a vague idea, and a burning desire to build something that mattered. I had always wanted to be my own boss, but I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were teachers, and the idea of working for someone else was ingrained in me since I could remember. Yet, here I was, standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump into the abyss. At the time, I was living in a small apartment with a roommate in a cramped, gray part of town. My job as a marketing assistant wasn't terrible, but I hated every second of it. I wanted to work for myself, create my own schedule, and build something that would last. That's when I came across an ad for a digital marketing course. I had a bit of knowledge from my marketing job, but this course promised to teach you how to make money online by running your own agency. It sounded like a dream come true, so I scraped together enough money for the course, and I went for it. The first few weeks were overwhelming. There was so much to learn: client acquisition, cold emailing, creating proposals, and the endless learning curve that comes with understanding Facebook ads and Google ads. But I stuck with it. After work, I would sit at my kitchen table, poring over modules, taking notes, and building up a list of potential clients. I felt the familiar anxiety creeping in, the "what am I doing?" feeling. But it was also exciting. Every time I landed a small client, it felt like I was one step closer to my dream. In the beginning, everything was a struggle. I didn't know how to set my prices or how to manage client expectations. Most of my first clients were small local businesses, barbershops, car repair shops, and even a flower shop. They had very little understanding of digital marketing, but I would promise them the world. I'd tell them that I could help them grow their business, get more customers, and increase sales. I was selling them a dream, but it wasn't a lie. I genuinely believed I could help them. The first real breakthrough came when I landed a small coffee shop in my town. The owner was skeptical, but he gave me a chance. I ran Facebook ads for him, and within the first month, his sales increased by 30%. He was thrilled, and I felt like I had finally found my rhythm. That was my first real win, and I made sure to use it as proof for all my future clients. But even as I started to get results, there were moments when I wanted to quit. There were countless nights of cold emailing, reaching out to potential clients, and dealing with rejection. I remember one client who told me they would never pay someone to run their Facebook ads. I was crushed, but I kept going. Every no felt like a step closer to a yes. Over time, things started to click. I understood what worked and what didn't. I found my niche in helping small local businesses with their social media marketing. I refined my pitch, improved my processes, and built better relationships with my clients. Slowly, I was able to charge more and attract higher quality clients. I hired my first part-time assistant to help with the workload, and together, we grew the business. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. A year into the business, I made a massive mistake. I had taken on too many clients, and I wasn't keeping up with the demands. My assistant quit, and I was left scrambling to manage everything. There were late nights, missed calls, and too many projects in the air. I was on the verge of burning out, and I knew I needed to change something. That's when I realized that growth isn't just about taking on more work. It's about smart scaling. I took a step back, reevaluated my processes, and started hiring more help. I focused on creating better systems and automating as much of the work as I could. I made sure to maintain strong relationships with my clients, but I also had to be firm about boundaries. Not every opportunity was worth pursuing. Slowly, my business became more sustainable. I was able to take weekends off, spend more time with friends, and focus on the bigger picture. It was around this time that I met my business mentor. I had been following him for years, reading his blog, and watching his YouTube videos. One day, I reached out to him for advice, and to my surprise, he agreed to meet with me. Our conversation changed everything. He taught me how to think strategically, how to delegate effectively, and most importantly, how to scale without losing control. The mentor-mentee relationship transformed my business. I went from a one-man operation to having a small team of employees. We expanded our service offerings, added new clients, and started building a brand. I invested in better tools and systems, and I even started traveling to conferences to network with other entrepreneurs. Things were moving faster than I ever imagined. Then came the hardest decision I've ever made. In 2022, after 5 years of grinding, I sold the business. It wasn't something I had planned on, but the opportunity came at the right time. I had built something valuable, and I knew it was time to move on to the next chapter. Selling the business was bittersweet. It was my baby, my dream, but I also knew I had accomplished everything I had set out to do. I sold it to a larger agency that would continue to grow it. Since the sale, I've taken some time off to travel, reflect, and focus on new ideas. But even now, I still think about the early days, the sleepless nights, the rejections, the small wins that kept me going. The journey wasn't easy, but I wouldn't change a thing. It taught me more about myself than I ever expected. I guess the biggest takeaway from all of this is that entrepreneurship isn't a straight line. It's messy, chaotic, and full of setbacks. But if you keep going, if you learn from your mistakes, and if you focus on getting better every day, you can build something that lasts. You don't need to have it all figured out at the start. You just need to start. And that's exactly what I did. So, if you're out there thinking about starting your own business, just start. It doesn't matter if you don't know everything or if you're scared. The only thing that matters is taking that first step, because one small step can turn into something much bigger than you ever imagined. I started a business by accident. That's the short version. The long version involves a cheap laptop, a cracked phone screen, and a deep hatred for my boss that eventually got channeled into something productive. I never thought I'd be sitting here 5 years later, writing this from a home office that overlooks the lake behind my house. It still feels unreal sometimes. Let me take you back. I was 28, working in customer service for a software company in a nameless office park. My days were a soul-sucking parade of calls from angry customers and managers who measured your worth by how fast you could close a ticket. I was making $42K a year and living in a one-bedroom apartment with carpet that hadn't been replaced since Bush was in office, the first one. Then one day my phone slipped out of my hand in the parking lot and shattered. I couldn't afford to fix it professionally, so I went down the YouTube rabbit hole and ordered a $20 replacement screen. It took me 2 hours and a lot of sweating, but I fixed it. It felt like a magic trick. That night I posted in a local Facebook group, I just replaced my own phone screen. If anyone needs help, I'll do it for $40. I got 4 messages in an hour. I did those 4 repairs over the next week, each taking me over an hour, but I made $160. More than I made in 2 days at work. The next weekend, I made a flyer on Canva and printed 30 copies at Office Depot. I drove around the strip malls in my area and asked local barbershops and vape stores if I could leave them at the front counter. Most said no, but 2 said yes. That was enough. The following weekend, I had 7 appointments. I spent the next month fixing phones in the evenings, after my 9 to 5, at my apartment dining table. Eventually, I started picking up patterns. iPhones were the most common, especially older models. I learned where to order better tools and parts. I invested in a heat gun, anti-static mats, and magnifying goggles. I could now do most screens in under 20 minutes. I raised my price to $60, then $70. I started offering battery replacements too. By month 4, I was pulling in around $2,000 a month on top of my salary. That's when I got my first repeat customer, someone who broke their phone again and insisted I was cheaper and faster than the Apple Store. That felt like validation. Like maybe this wasn't just a side hustle. The turning point came when my manager pulled me into his office for too many after-lunch lights. I've been using my break to run out and do phone repairs. I thought I was being slick. I wasn't. I didn't get fired, but it was clear I was on thin ice. I remember going home that day, sitting in my car, sweating through my shirt, staring at my apartment complex like it was a prison. I had about $5,000 in savings and another $2,000 in credit card space. I thought, what if I actually tried? I didn't quit right away. I gave myself 3 months to test the waters. I booked a booth at a weekend flea market for $75. I put up a sign that said, phone repair, 30 minutes or less, and set up a card table with my tools. I made $650 that weekend. 2 weeks later, I gave notice at my job. My manager raised an eyebrow and asked if I had something lined up. I told him I was going to fix phones full-time. He laughed, not maliciously. More like he thought I was joking. I wasn't. I did flea markets every weekend for the next 6 months. I kept track of every dollar. Some weekends I made $300, others close to $200. I started getting regulars. One guy ran a vape store and asked if I wanted to set up a shelf in the back of his shop. Rent would be $400/month. I jumped on it. That little shelf became a corner. Then the corner became a desk. Then, 18 months after I left my job, I opened my first storefront, 900 square feet in a low-traffic strip mall, painted a sad beige, but it was mine. I called it Fix Fast. It wasn't clever, but it was simple and searchable. I hired my cousin to help with walk-ins. She was 19 and way better at dealing with people than I was. I focused on repairs. We made $11,000 that first month. By the end of the year, it was closer to $22,000. I paid her $15/hour, bought a used soda fridge, and started stocking it with Red Bulls and water for customers. It felt surreal. Then came year 3. That's when I started thinking bigger. People asked if I fixed tablets and laptops. I said no at first, then I figured why not. I learned how to replace MacBook batteries and cracked tablet glass. I bought a used iMac just to take it apart and learn the hard way. Word got out. I was that guy now. The one you went to before you paid Apple $400. I partnered with 2 local high schools for student discounts. I sponsored a youth soccer team. I got a second location, then a third closer to the university. Every time I opened a new shop, I reinvested profits. No investors, no loans. Just grit and spreadsheets and long nights watching repair tutorials. Now, 5 years later, FixFast has 5 locations, 19 employees, and a small repair training course that runs every quarter. We've repaired over 14,000 devices. Last year, we cleared $1.2 million in revenue. I still do repairs now and then, just to stay sharp. There were mistakes, of course. I once hired a tech who swapped out real parts for cheap ones and pocketed the difference. Lost a few customers over that. Had to rebuild some trust. Another time, I signed a lease for a bad location and lost $10K before I pulled out. Lessons learned. But I never once thought about going back to that office park. I think the best part isn't the money. It's the autonomy. If I want to take a Tuesday off, I can. If I want to spend the morning fishing, no one stops me. I decide how my life is structured. I never planned to become an entrepreneur. Honestly, I barely planned anything at all. I was the kind of kid who coasted through school with decent grades, enough to not raise red flags, but I never had that drive others seem to talk about. I didn't dream about starting a business or becoming a CEO. Mostly, I just wanted to make enough money to travel, eat good food, and not hate my job. But life has a way of cornering you until doing the risky thing becomes the only sane option. I was 27, broke, and jobless when I accidentally started my company. Back then, I lived in a shoebox apartment in Pittsburgh with 2 roommates, one of whom had a band that practiced every Thursday night, loudly, and the other who microwaved fish. I had just been laid off from a mid-tier marketing job when the agency downsized. Not a surprise, I was never more than a name on their spreadsheet. I spent 3 months applying to jobs, going to networking events, tweaking my LinkedIn headline like that would suddenly change my luck. Nothing. One night, out of frustration, I posted a sarcastic tweet. Should I just start editing people's LinkedIn profiles for $50 and call it a business? I woke up the next morning to 12 DMs. Most were joking, but 3 were serious. And one sent me $50 via PayPal. I hadn't even thought through how I'd do it. I literally opened their LinkedIn, copied it into a Google Doc, rewrote it based on what I remembered from resume writing in college, and sent it back. They loved it. Said they'd tell their friends. That week I made $200. Was it a business? Not really. But I hadn't made $200 in a single week in months. So I kept going. I threw up a 1-page sign-on card, called myself a personal brand consultant, sounded better than LinkedIn editor, and posted about it on my tiny Twitter and Reddit accounts. By the end of that month, I had made $100. I didn't think I was doing anything remarkable. But here's what I figured out. Most people are terrible at talking about themselves. They either oversell and come off like clowns or undersell and disappear into the noise. I was decent at finding a balance. And for many of my clients, immigrants, folks in career transitions, people re-entering the workforce, this stuff was incredibly high stakes. Month 3, I made $700. Month 4, I crossed $5K. By now, I was fully booked. I didn't even have calendar software. I was still doing scheduling over email and crossing my fingers I didn't double book. My process was duct taped together with Google Sheets and muscle memory. It wasn't scalable, and I didn't care. Until I got sick. Nothing serious. Just a bad flu that knocked me out for 2 weeks. But when I wasn't working, I wasn't earning. 0 income. Projects delayed. Refunds issued. Clients frustrated. I realized I'd built myself a cage. I had left my job to escape burnout and had recreated it, solo. That was the first time I thought, okay, I either grow this thing or I kill it. I took a step back and looked at my process. What parts could be templated? What parts needed me, and what didn't? I realized most clients asked the same questions, wanted the same structure, and even had similar backgrounds. I could standardize 80% of the work. So I built a playbook. Literally, a 40-page Google Doc full of templates, examples, and step-by-step guidance for writing LinkedIn bios, resumes, cover letters, and even cold emails. I sold it for $99. It bombed. Well, not completely, but it made $800 in the first 2 weeks. Nowhere near the $5K/month I was pulling before. But I didn't give up. I revised the playbook, added video walkthroughs, threw in live group calls, and turned it into a career accelerator bootcamp. I launched it again with a waitlist. 50 people signed up. at backslash $249 ahead. That's backslash $12 for 50. In 1 week. I cried. That was the turning point. I started taking the business seriously. I incorporated, got an accountant, rebuilt the website, launched a newsletter, started making real content instead of winging it. Eventually, I hired help, first a VA, then a part-time writer, then a career coach. I built a tiny team of 3. My job changed from doing the work to building the system. Over the next 18 months, we helped over 2,000 people rewrite their career stories. We ran workshops for boot camps and universities. We partnered with a nonprofit to provide free services to formerly incarcerated individuals re-entering the workforce. Revenue passed backslash $300K, all from a sarcastic tweet. Now, I'm 31. We've grown the team to 6. I still live in Pittsburgh, but in a much nicer place, no fish smells. I work about 30 hours a week, mostly on strategy and product development. We just launched a new course on personal websites, and it's already selling well. The funniest part? I still don't feel like a real entrepreneur. I don't have an MBA. I don't read business books. I don't dream about exits or Series A rounds. But I built something people needed. I made it work. I turned it into something that gives people hope when they feel stuck. And I made a life I actually like. Sometimes, the best plans are the ones you never made. About 6 years ago, I got laid off from my job at a regional marketing agency. It was nothing personal, they were downsizing, and I was the lowest on the totem pole. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot, holding the box with my desk plant and 3 office mugs, just thinking, now what? I had no real savings, no backup plan, and definitely no idea how to start a business. But that layoff ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. Let me back up. At the time, I was 29, had a degree in communications, and had spent most of my 20s hopping between admin and marketing jobs that never quite felt right. I didn't hate the work, but I never felt like I was building anything. You know what I mean? I was always clocking in, clocking out, and counting down the days until Friday. Still, losing my job wasn't part of the plan. I went home and started applying to jobs like crazy. After about 2 weeks, the only interviews I was landing were for jobs that paid even less than the one I just lost. I was getting desperate. I started freelancing to make ends meet, mostly managing social media accounts for small businesses. It was just meant to be temporary. But one day, I had a conversation that changed everything. A local coffee shop owner I worked with asked if I could design a simple flyer for their upcoming event. I'd never done graphic design before, but I said sure and cobbled something together in Canva. It wasn't great, but it did the job. They liked it, and soon enough, they referred me to a few other small businesses. That's when I had the light bulb moment. These businesses didn't care about fancy agency work. They just wanted someone affordable, fast, and reliable who got it. I created a basic website, called myself a one-stop marketing shop for small businesses, and started offering flat-rate packages, social media, email newsletters, flyers, even simple websites. I priced everything dirt cheap because I had no confidence and just wanted clients. My first month, I made backslash $600. The second month, backslash $200. By month 4, I was pulling in almost backslash $3,000. It wasn't much, but it paid my rent and gave me some breathing room. The turning point came when a restaurant chain with 5 locations reached out. They needed help running promotions across Instagram and Facebook. I charged them backslash $1,000/month, and they said yes without blinking. I immediately had imposter syndrome. I thought, they're going to realize I'm just one guy in a hoodie working from his kitchen. But they didn't care. I got them results. Engagement went up. People started coming in with promo codes we ran online, and their sales increased. A few months later, they doubled my rate. I hired my first freelancer, a friend from college, to help with scheduling posts. Then I brought on a designer from Upwork. Then a copywriter. Suddenly, it wasn't just me anymore. We weren't an agency yet, but we were a team. Around this time, I rebranded. I bought a domain that sounded legit, created a new logo, and changed all my email signatures. I called us Bright Moss Creative. Don't ask me why. It just sounded cool. By year 2, we had about 15 clients on monthly retainers and had crossed backslash $120K in revenue. I was still doing most of the account management, which meant I worked 12 to 14 hours a day. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that was mine. Then came the burnout. By year 3, I had 22 clients and was managing a team of 6 freelancers. I wasn't doing any creative work anymore, just putting out fires, answering emails, and dealing with invoicing nightmares. I had taken 0 vacations. My relationships were strained. I wasn't sleeping. It all came to a head when a long-term client left with no notice because I forgot to post a major holiday promo. That same week, 2 freelancers ghosted mid-project, and a potential client who had verbally committed to a $5,000/month deal changed their mind last minute. I was toast. I almost shut it all down. Seriously. I started drafting an email to my clients saying I was transitioning out of the business. But I never hit send. Instead, I took a weekend off, the first in a long time, and tried to rethink everything. That Monday, I made 3 big decisions. 1. I was going to hire a project manager. 2. I was going to raise our prices. 3. I was going to stop working with any client who gave me anxiety. It was terrifying. I was worried I'd lose half my clients. And I did lose a few. But something amazing happened. The new clients I started attracting were more professional, more respectful, and paid more. We started operating like a real agency, with systems and processes instead of chaos and Slack DMs at 11 p.m. By the end of year 4, we hit $350K in annual revenue. I had 2 full-time employees and a reliable group of contractors. We had standard onboarding processes, client portals, branded decks. Hell, we even had a company retreat, rented an Airbnb, and worked together for a week, but it counted. Now, 6 years in, we're a team of 8 full-time people. We specialize in digital marketing for niche local franchises, like dental chains, gyms, and pet grooming brands. Last year we did just under $900K in revenue, and this year we're on track to cross $1.2 million. Do I miss the simplicity of freelancing? Sometimes, but I don't miss wondering if I can make rent, or sending 43 cold emails just to get 1 reply. What I've learned is this: businesses aren't built in a flash of genius. They're built in the grind, in saying yes to small opportunities, in being scared but doing it anyway, in screwing up and showing up the next day to fix it. There was no master plan here, just a lot of trial, error, coffee, and some good luck sprinkled in. If you're thinking about starting something, just start. You don't need an MBA. You don't need investors. You don't need the perfect name or brand. You just need to solve a real problem for someone and be someone they can trust. Everything else can be figured out as you go. I was 26 when I lost my job, had $512 in my bank account, and accidentally started a business that now makes over $4 million a year. I've been working for a mid-sized digital marketing firm in Denver, mostly doing SEO content and back-end analytics for local clients. I didn't love the work, but it paid the bills, and I could pretend to care about roofing companies' bounce rates for 8 hours a day. That is, until I got called into a conference room one Friday afternoon and told that I was no longer aligned with the company's strategic vision. Translation: I was fired. I went home, cracked open a cheap beer, and stared at my laptop screen. Panic started crawling up my neck. I had rent due in 2 weeks, a beat-up Honda Civic with 198K miles, and no backup plan. My degree in English literature wasn't exactly a hot ticket in the job market, and every freelance gig I applied for seemed to go to someone who had 10 years of experience or was willing to work for $5 an hour. So I did what any desperate millennial would do. I started a side hustle I didn't even believe in. The idea was embarrassingly simple. During my marketing job, I had created a handful of niche blogs for clients that ranked pretty well. Stuff like how to waterproof your basement in high humidity areas and top RV parks in Oregon. The content was SEO optimized, a little dry, but it pulled traffic. I figured maybe I could do something similar, build a niche site, load it with affiliate links, and pray it made $100/month. I started a website called dogearlab.com. It was supposed to be a side project, a blog that reviewed dog harnesses, chew toys, food brands, etc. I didn't even own a dog at the time. I picked the niche based on keyword research. I wrote 15 articles over the next 2 weeks: best collars for pit bulls, how to train a puppy, 5 signs of dog anxiety, stuff that had decent search volume and low competition. By week 3, I had $27 left in my checking account. I was eating rice and frozen spinach twice a day. But then something insane happened. I made my first affiliate sale. Someone bought a $32 chew toy from Amazon through one of my links. I earned backslash $1.26. That tiny commission felt like a miracle. I doubled down. I started publishing an article every day. I wrote them myself, researched keywords using free tools, and took screenshots of customer reviews to make the content feel legit. Traffic trickled in. Then a little more. By month 3, Dog Gear Lab was pulling in 3,000 visitors a month. I made backslash $184 in affiliate commissions. I cried in the shower like a weirdo because it felt like proof I wasn't doomed to fail. That same month, I met someone on a freelancer forum who said, "You should make your own product. Don't just send everyone to Amazon." I dismissed it at first. I didn't have money to develop a product, but I kept thinking about it. I looked at what people complained about in reviews: bad stitching, harnesses that slipped off certain breeds, plastic buckles that snapped. I started sketching out ideas, watching YouTube videos on textile manufacturing, and emailing suppliers on Alibaba. Eventually, I found a manufacturer in Vietnam willing to produce a low MOQ run of a custom dog harness. I maxed out my credit card with a backslash $1 for 100 order for 200 units. The first shipment arrived 3 months later. They looked legit: neoprene padding, adjustable straps, and a sturdy metal clip. I called it the Bark Pro harness and listed it on my website for backslash $29.99. I sold out in 2 weeks. I reordered 1,000 units and added a couple other products: leashes, poop bag holders, a collapsible water bowl. I redesigned the website to feel more like a boutique shop and less like a blog. I hired a freelance designer to clean up my logo for backslash $80. That first full year, I made backslash $118,000 in revenue and about backslash $27,000 in profit. I moved out of my terrible apartment, bought a used Subaru, and got a rescue dog named Pepper. The second year, I added email marketing and started running Facebook ads. I learned how to do basic retargeting, set up abandoned cart flows, and leaned into TikTok content showing real-life tests of the harnesses. One video of Pepper pulling a 30-pound bag of flour while wearing a Bark Pro harness went semi-viral. That month, we did backslash $62,000 in sales. By year 3, I had hired 2 remote VAs, a full-time customer service rep, and a fulfillment partner in Utah to handle logistics. We expanded the product line again: winter coats, reflective gear, even a line of calming supplements. That was a whole FDA compliance rabbit hole I had to learn the hard way. We rebranded as Canine Craft and became a proper DTC brand. I got invited to speak on 2 e-commerce podcasts. I reinvested every dime, lived modestly, and pushed for organic growth. My old boss even reached out to say, "Saw you on LinkedIn. Looks like you're crushing it." I didn't even know how to respond. Last year, we crossed backslash $4 million in revenue. Profit margins have held at about 28%, and we're in early talks with a pet retailer about a wholesale partnership. I have a team of 8 now, and I still write the occasional blog post when I'm feeling nostalgic. People ask what the secret is. I wish I had one. I didn't invent a new tech or raise millions in VC. I just figured out how to solve a real, specific problem, showed up every day, and learned on the fly. I also failed a ton, ran unprofitable ad campaigns, ordered 500 units of a product that turned out to be defective, lost sleep over shipping delays, and almost gave up twice. But I didn't. And to think, the whole thing started because I couldn't find a job and had backslash $512 to my name. If you're reading this and stuck, let me tell you, it's okay to start small. It's okay to build something that's not perfect. And it's okay to be terrified. Just don't stop moving. Because sometimes, the best things in your life come from what looks like the worst day. If someone had told me 6 years ago that I'd be running a backslash $3.5 million business from a former janitor's closet, I probably would have laughed and gone back to cleaning the puke off aisle 6. Let me back up. I was 27, broke, and working the night shift as a cleaner at a 24-hour supermarket in Michigan. My college degree in sociology hadn't done much more than rack up backslash $64K in debt. I had worked odd jobs for years, hopping between landscaping, warehouse, delivery driving, and eventually landed the cleaning gig that at least offered insurance. My life was a cycle of sleep-deprived nights, fried food, and dreading the first of every month. Then one night, during a break at 3:45 a.m., I overheard 2 stock guys talking about retail arbitrage. One of them had made backslash $800 the previous week flipping clearance items from Walmart onto Amazon. I didn't even know that was a thing. But after that shift, I stayed up instead of going home and fell into a YouTube rabbit hole. 5 hours later, I had watched a dozen videos about fulfillment by Amazon, FBA, dropshipping, and flipping products. That night changed everything. I started with a $100 budget, the last of what I had after rent and utilities. I bought 6 Nerf blasters that were on clearance for $12 each at Target and listed them on Amazon for $29.99. Within 2 weeks, all of them sold. I made about $60 profit total, which was tiny, but more importantly, it worked. That $60 turned into $120, then $300. I was spending all my free hours scouting clearance aisles, scanning barcodes with the Amazon seller app, and watching what moved. By month 4, I had done about $2,000 in sales and made around $600 profit. I was exhausted, working nights and packing shipments during the day, but I started to see the potential. I also realized that this wasn't sustainable. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life chasing deals and manually packing boxes. So I pivoted. Instead of retail arbitrage, I started looking into private label products. I found a niche in phone accessories, specifically minimalist phone grips. There were dozens of designs, but none of them addressed a common problem I'd heard from friends. They were ugly or didn't work with wireless charging. I found a supplier on Alibaba that offered flexible, low-profile phone grips and spent $250 on a prototype batch. I slapped a brand name on it, Griply, and designed a logo on Canva. In hindsight, the branding sucked, but I was proud of it. I made a basic Shopify site, set up an Instagram, and sent DMs to micro-influencers offering $20 to post about my product. The first few didn't get much traction, but one influencer with 12K followers posted a story using Griply while on a treadmill, and it blew up. I made 47 sales that day. My inventory ran out in 3 days. I was completely unprepared. I took all the profits and ordered 1,000 units. That was terrifying. It cost nearly $900 including shipping. I maxed out my credit card and crossed my fingers. While I waited for the shipment, I worked double shifts to build a buffer. When the boxes finally arrived, I took 2 days off, took photos, polished the website, and relaunched. That month, I made over $7,000 in revenue. Within 8 months of that first sale, I was doing $15K/month in revenue and cleared about $4K profit. I quit the cleaning job. It felt like jumping off a cliff. The next year was brutal. Competition exploded. 3 new brands popped up selling nearly identical phone grips. One even ripped off my exact product name with an extra I at the end. My margins shrank as I tried to outbid them in ads. I tried influencer giveaways, SEO blog posts, even Reddit marketing. It was like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a solo cup. What saved me was an angry email. A customer wrote in complaining that the grip melted in her car. Turns out, the adhesive I was using wasn't heat resistant. I refunded her and sent her a thank you coupon. Then I got curious. I asked if I could call her. We talked for 20 minutes, and she said she liked the concept, but she needed something classy enough for the office and durable enough for the dashboard. Boom. That became the new direction. I spent the next 3 months developing an upgraded model using a heat-resistant adhesive, a metal base, and a textured matte finish. I also renamed the brand to Hold Fast and hired a freelance designer to redo everything: logo, site, packaging. I launched it as a premium grip for professionals. $24.99 retail. Free returns. That product changed everything. Hold Fast exploded. Sales went from $18K/month to $50K within 60 days of launch. By the end of the year, we did just over $630,000 in revenue with a 32% profit margin. I got an email from a wholesale buyer at a regional tech accessory chain. They wanted to stock 3,000 units. I scrambled to fulfill it, called in friends to help pack orders, and converted my dad's garage into a mini warehouse. I never went full VC. I stayed lean. I reinvested everything, outsourced fulfillment to a 3PL, and hired a full-time operations guy, a former coworker from the cleaning job. I lived off $3K/month, drove my beater Honda, and kept my head down. By year 4, Hold Fast had 3 SKUs, two of them bestsellers, and hit $2.1 M in sales. We broke $3.5 M last year. I still don't have an office. Just a small leased unit we call the closet because it literally used to be one at an old industrial park. I've learned a few things the hard way. 1. Don't chase trends. Solve real problems. 2. Listen to complaints. They're often roadmap gold. 3. Don't be afraid to rebrand or pivot. 4. Your first idea probably sucks. It's supposed to. That's how you get to the good one. These days, I'm not cleaning puke or scrubbing freezer aisles. I wake up when I want, do deep work until noon, then usually unplug by 3. I travel, I read a lot, and I teach a few courses online about product market fit and lean bootstrapping. No yachts, no Lumbos, but freedom? That's worth more than anything else I could have flipped. 3 years ago, I almost lost everything trying to start a company that nobody asked for. What followed was the most humbling and eventually rewarding journey of my life. Back in early 2021, I was working as a mid-level product manager at a mid-sized tech company in Chicago. It paid well, I had a comfortable apartment, and the work wasn't too demanding. But like many others stuck in corporate jobs during COVID, I was itching for something more. I'd been playing with the idea of launching a startup for a while, fueled by the glorified stories I kept reading about founders on LinkedIn and Twitter. I had a decent savings cushion, $38K, no kids, and a supportive girlfriend. In other words, all the excuses were gone. I quit my job in April and launched myself into building something I thought people needed. A platform that helped remote workers find short-term co-living spaces with curated communities. Think of it as a hybrid between Airbnb, WeWork, and a dating app. I called it Tribe Nest. The idea was built off a single assumption. Remote workers were lonely and wanted to live with like-minded people while working in beautiful locations. I had lived in a Bali co-living space in 2019 and figured, if I loved it, others will too. I poured $10K into the MVP, which I hacked together with a freelance dev in Ukraine. The prototype was rough but functional. It let users create a profile, match with spaces in cities like Austin, Lisbon, and Medellin, and join a tribe of others heading to the same place. We onboard 5 property hosts willing to list for free in exchange for traffic. I ran Facebook and Instagram ads. I posted on Reddit. I spammed nomad forums. In 2 months, we got 600 signups and 5 bookings. Not bad, I thought. But here's the thing. Nearly all of them canceled within a week. Only one actually followed through and stayed. I emailed every canceled user, and the responses were brutal. One person told me, "It feels like a college dorm for digital brothers." Another said, "If I wanted roommates, I'd just use Craigslist and save $800. The most honest feedback came from a woman who said, "I'm sure this works for some people, but most of us just want peace and a desk, not strangers forcing community." That's when it hit me. I had built a product based on a fantasy. My fantasy. Still, I was stubborn. I pivoted Tribe Nest 3 times in 9 months. Once to focus on just female travelers, then to corporate offsite retreats, then to executive sabbaticals. Every pivot was a temporary fix that delayed the inevitable. No one wanted it bad enough to pay for it. By March 2022, I had $3K left in my account, and the relationship with my girlfriend had deteriorated. I'd become obsessed with proving the idea right, ignoring her concerns and spending every waking hour tweaking the site or trying to force partnerships. She finally told me, "I miss the guy who used to listen. You're not building a company. You're trying to win an argument." That night, I cried in the shower. Not because she was wrong, but because I knew she was right. I had failed. Tribe Nest was dead. My money was gone. And I had no job lined up. I spent the next few weeks applying for product roles again. Humbling. But while I waited, I took on freelance gigs. One client, a small local gym chain, asked me if I could build them a basic scheduling system that integrated with Stripe and let members book classes online. I said yes, even though I had no experience doing that exactly. I built a simple system using no-code tools and a bit of custom JavaScript. They loved it. Their members started using it more than their old clunky app. They referred me to another gym, and then another. By September 2022, I had 8 paying clients. All small gyms or personal trainers who wanted simple, reliable booking tools. No BS. No bloated CRMs. Just things that worked. That's when the idea clicked. Not a sexy tech startup, but a B2B SaaS for small fitness businesses. I scrapped TribeNest for good and launched FitSimple, a barebones tool that let trainers build a booking page, set availability, and collect payments. Nothing fancy. No AI. No blockchain. Just product market fit. This time, I started with interviews. Lots of them. I called 50 trainers, gym owners, and coaches in 30 days. I learned what they hated about MindBody, Zen Planner, and even Calendly. They wanted fewer clicks, clearer calendars, and real people to talk to if something broke. I hired a proper developer, the same guy from Ukraine, shout out to Ivan, and we built a lean version of FitSimple in 6 weeks. I charged $29/month to start and offered 14-day trials. Within 6 months, we had 200 paying customers. I didn't even touch ads, just referrals, Facebook groups, and a couple of Reddit threads and niche fitness forums. Revenue hit $6K MRR by May 2023, then $12K by September. I brought on a part-time support rep and reinvested profits into refining the onboarding. I still did demos myself. I still wrote every help doc. And I made sure we didn't chase every feature request. We had one rule. Would it save time or make money for our customers? Today, as I write this in May 2025, FitSimple just crossed $38K MRR. We're profitable, with a team of 4, and we've never raised a dime. I pay myself a modest salary and work 35 hours a week. My old product job offered me twice what I pay myself now, and I said no without blinking. But more than the money, I finally feel like I'm solving a real problem. Every week, someone emails us saying, "I wish I found you guys sooner." I sometimes look back at TribeNest and cringe at how delusional I was. But I also know that if I hadn't failed that hard, I'd never have built the humility needed to find the right thing. Entrepreneurship isn't about chasing a vision. It's about finding pain and removing it. If you're still reading and you're thinking about starting something, stop asking what people want. Ask what they hate. That's where the gold is. 2 years ago, I started a mobile coffee business from the back of a rusted-out 1999 Dodge Ram. Then I bought off Facebook Marketplace for $1,800. Today, I have a profitable brand, 2 employees, and a 6-figure revenue stream. But the journey from that first clunky espresso machine to serving coffee at major corporate events was brutal, humbling, and probably the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. I was working a 9-to-5 job in commercial real estate. The money was okay, the hours were predictable, but I hated it. I wasn't terrible at it, but every Monday morning I felt like I was dying a little faster than I should have. I wanted to build something, and more importantly, I wanted control over my time. Not passive income, not a tech startup. I just wanted to create something people could touch, taste, remember. The idea came one morning while I was waiting in line at my local coffee shop. There was a food truck parked outside, and I thought, why doesn't someone do this with coffee? But better? Not just coffee, but a real espresso experience. Lattes, cortados, flat whites. Most coffee trucks served instant or drip coffee. I wanted to replicate the specialty cafe feel on wheels. So, like every naive entrepreneur, I went home that night and Googled how to start a coffee truck. I stayed up until 3 a.m. binge reading forums, watching barista technique videos, and browsing Craigslist for used vans. I made a list of what I'd need: van, espresso machine, grinder, water tanks, generator, health permits, business license. I estimated startup costs at around $12K. I had $7 saved up. I figured I'd make the rest work. I bought the van 2 weeks later. It smelled like oil and despair. The roof leaked when it rained, and there was a squirrel nest in the glove box. My parents thought I was having a quarter-life crisis. I parked it in my apartment lot and spent weekends gutting it out, insulating it with foam panels, and painting the inside a clean, sterile white. I installed shelves, built a counter with plywood and metal brackets, and watched endless plumbing tutorials to rig a water system with a foot pump. The espresso machine was my biggest investment. A refurbished 2-group La Marzocco Linea Mini I found for $2,800 through a distributor in Texas. I picked up a Mazia grinder off a retiring cafe owner for $600. To power it all, I bought a noisy Honda generator that made more racket than a lawnmower. But it worked. I called the business Third Rail Espresso, a nod to Subway energy and also just a cool phrase I liked. I made an Instagram page, took a few staged shots with a friend's DSLR, and spent $90 printing a vinyl logo wrap for the van's sides. My first setup was a joke. I parked outside a yoga studio on Saturdays with a sandwich board and handwritten menu. My prices were low $2 for espresso, $3 for lattes. The first day I made $42. The second week, $79. By week 4, I hit $150 and broke even on my beans and milk. My goal wasn't profit yet, it was proof. Proof that someone would pay for what I was making. That winter nearly killed the business. My pipes froze twice. The generator stalled in sub-zero temps. No one wants iced lattes in January. I took a part-time delivery job to keep money coming in and spent nights designing loyalty cards, updating the website, and emailing every farmer's market within a 50-mile radius. The breakthrough came in spring when a local artisan market offered me a recurring Saturday slot. It cost $100/week, which was more than I was making, but I took the risk. The crowds were huge. People lined up for pour-overs and oat milk cappuccinos. By June, I was pulling in $800-$1,000 on Saturdays alone. That's when I realized I had something. I reinvested everything into upgrades, a quieter inverter generator, a fridge, better plumbing, even hired a part-time barista to help with weekend shifts. Her name was Maddie. She had worked at a big-name cafe and brought serious espresso chops. She also helped build a better drink menu and suggested batch-making cold brew to speed up service. With 2 people, we could handle double the volume. We started doing private gigs, pop-up weddings, open houses, small festivals. A friend in HR hired us for a company appreciation day at her tech job. That one event led to a cascade of corporate inquiries. I made a pricing sheet, slapped corporate espresso card on the website, and within 2 months, I was booking 2 or 3 private events per week. The van became more of a marketing tool than a workspace. For many events, we'd set up a compact coffee bar indoors with a smaller machine and serve 100-plus employees in a tower window. I charge $600 minimum per event, plus extra for custom cups and branding. Profit margin soared. I had a wait list for bookings 3 weeks out. By the end of the second year, I had crossed $110,000 in revenue. I finally quit the real estate job, paid off my credit card debt, and started saving for a second setup. I didn't want to franchise or scale too fast, but I knew I had hit something that worked, a niche blend of craft coffee and mobile convenience. Today, Third Rail Espresso has 2 setups, 1 van and 1 modular cart, and 3 part-time baristas I rotate for gigs. We're not a household name, but we're booked solid through the next quarter, and every event brings new clients. What no one tells you is how hard the first year is. I cried in that van more times than I can count. I nearly quit twice. I ran out of gas once during service and had to refund 30 people in a row. But you learn. You learn to underpromise and overdeliver. You learn that good branding is just as important as good coffee. And you learn that nobody is coming to save you. You just have to keep showing up, rain or shine, generator or no generator. The best part? It still feels like mine. Every espresso shot, every early morning, every awkward customer interaction, it's mine. And I'd take that over a corner office any day. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.